Want to welcome everybody. It delights me to have everybody here. This is a nice turnout for 1 o'clock, and I'm delighted to look around. I see some of the Sharon people here who watched Andy grow up as a little girl who've come, which delights me, like the Gallants. And I'm delighted to see high school students like Leslie giving hugs with Alex, who are high school students at other high schools that are here. And I'm going to call, I won't call because I don't want to put anybody on the spot for like Leslie and Alex, but I'm looking to include other high school students, and not just high school students, but that's where this story begins. And obviously it's a bigger story than just Newport Harbor High School. But the immediate context for this conversation is Newport Harbor High School, in which many of you have seen the video, or pictures, I should say, of high school students just a couple weeks ago on a Saturday night drinking underage and taking those red cups and forming them into a swastika and then saluting. And for many of us, that was confusing to think that kids would do that, and even shocking. But for me, it's just confusing to know that that would be a thing. And among the students at Newport Harbor who was aware of that situation was Max. And so, and to fast forward, and then we'll start at the beginning. Max, are you a member of the student council?
No, I am not. I wasn't too engaged in the student body. I wasn't like a big figure or anything. I pretty much was only at school just to do my work and leave. I don't want to spend any extra time there. And yeah, I'm not ASB or part of any Jewish student union or anything like that.
So you first came to my attention, and perhaps others from the YouTube, of speaking to the students the following Monday. So again, it was 2 weeks ago today, and then going forward on Monday. I'll just pause to say it gives me great satisfaction, parental-like satisfaction, so that Max was bar mitzvahed, as well as Hannah and Leslie and Alex at CBI. So how did you come on the Monday assembly to speak?
So initially, the whole Sunday after the Saturday night on which the event occurred, it immediately united all of this Jewish student population at our school. By 9 o'clock the next morning, all the Jewish students were in a group chat.
How did people find out about it?
Okay, so the party was Saturday night, and I was at dinner with my mother and my god sister and my stepfather, and I get a message from one of my best friends, and it's a screenshot of a girl I know, a girl who I've spent time with and hung out with, and who I see at school. It's her social media story, and it's the infamous picture. And
describe the picture, because not everybody has seen it.
So the center of the image is a table filled with red solo cups, but they're neatly organized into a clear swastika. Well, I want to say 8 to 10 kids or something like that stood around it with the Sieg Heil and smiles on their faces. One girl was trying to look all cute, doing her Hitler salute, making a duck face and stuff. And
What's your first reaction when you get this on your phone Saturday night?
So it wasn't it wasn't surprise. So I saw it, and for me it wasn't something like this could never happen. How could this happen in my community? It's okay, this is something to be expected. Stuff like this goes on, and this is so I think of it as either way. it would have happened. But in this course of events in which they publicized it, and enables the media to make a big deal out of it, and our community to make a big deal out of it, as they should. And so that like gave us the momentum we needed to actually turn it into something bigger.
So what's your first reaction when you see it on the phone?
I wasn't shocked. I was just angry, because when I see people who I know and who I see around school idolizing a symbol that threatens me and all of you, our community and many other communities around the world, it's a symbol of psychological violence that has an underlying threat of real physical violence. And so I was very riled up. My heart was beating really fast. I was shaking and pacing around the room. And there was no moment of hesitation of like when I saw it. I wasn't like, oh, what should I do? I knew right then that like I had to make a big deal out of it and make sure everyone is seeing this and talking about it.
So what did you do?
I had already developed like a small social media following, so I put it on my social media and then expressed my disgust and stuff. And from there, it just spread like wildfire. And all the news stations picked it up. Everyone in the community was posting about it. And one thing I thought was pretty notable was one of the kids involved, as I was expressing my disgust in regards to the situation and exposing these kids, and as it was catching fire, this kid messages me who was at the party, and he says, you're part of a soft boy epidemic, like you're a joke. And then he says, I was at the party, I'm Jewish, like I let them do this, like it's okay. And then he said he was threatening to beat me up and trying to get my address so we could meet up and fight. And so just think of this situation. So a young Jewish boy, a 16 or 17-year-old Jewish boy, threatening another Jewish boy with physical violence in defense of his friends, his non-Jewish friends, idolizing a swastika. And so that's something that for me just really like boggled me, and it just made me realize like how normalized and desensitized that our community is to the kind of hatred that the picture emblemizes. But yeah, it's just, it made me sad that another Jewish boy is defending his like Hitler saluting, swastika toting friends, threatening. So he mixes the psychological violence that the symbol implies with the threat of physical violence on an actual Jew. And so that's where for me it became actually reminiscent of what real neo-Nazism is. And it was, my anger turned into sadness. And then the Sunday after, I had barely eaten or slept until then, and I was on the phone with other Jewish students, and we realized that this is something much bigger than one small incident at a party. Like, this is emblematic of a much larger trend of normalized xenophobia and just our national desensitization to hate. And we thought that we could turn it into something better and to make a movement out of it, because we had already been given so much momentum from the media coverage and everyone talking about it, that we wanted to use that to our advantage to actually speak out and unify the community and eradicate the hate. And I think making a big deal out of it, and the fact that everyone was talking about it so much is really healthy, because it just sets a precedent that things like this aren't normal in a time where it's increasingly becoming more normalized. So
fast forward to Monday. That's again where you spoke in front of the student body. What was that Monday event? And how did you come to be on the platform?
Yeah, so that was basically the school district's response to the incident. And that Sunday, me and the other Jewish students had written that open letter to the community and to the school, and we just expressed our sentiments and our sadness. And then the letter finished with what our aim is to happen in response to this, and for the community to unite and to like eradicate the hate and create actual permanent and positive sociocultural change. So we wrote that letter, and that letter got a lot of traction. And on Sunday I was on the phone with our principal and stuff, and he told me he had organized this open forum community meeting on Monday at our school and our theater. And since me and Ben Kwong, a Jewish colleague of mine, since we kind of championed the letter and spoke out against it, he invited us to come speak, and also just as Jewish student representatives. And so we hadn't really written anything because we were already so passionate about it that we could just start talking and just say what's on our mind, and it would have been well received. And so we kind of just went up there and expressed how we felt about it and the direction that we wanted to see the community go in as a result of it. And it was amazing. Like, the room was overflowing.
Who was in that room?
Everyone, hundreds and hundreds of people. And it was just really powerful to see how something based in hate can cause so much love and so much unity. And so that's when I really realized that, like, the movement that's arising out of this is something very necessary and powerful. And a lot has happened since that Monday.
Like, don't go too fast, because you're telling a story that is really engaging. The boy who threatened you, what did you do about that?
Initially, I was just kind of like making witty remarks back to him. And then I realized that like that won't really do anything. So I just decided to stop engaging entirely. And I kept getting messages from him, but I just left them on read. And yeah.
Did you make it public that he was threatening you?
No, I didn't. And my mom was really worried about it, just because I'm a Jew speaking out against like hatred, and people are threatening me with violence, and like she kept having vivid dreams of bricks being thrown through our windows and stuff. And yeah.
Well, one of the lovely things about the video was you introducing your grandma Aggie and acknowledging that your grandmother's a Holocaust survivor. So that gives you added context and, if you will, credibility about the possibilities of hate. What surprised you about the reaction on Monday night to that speech? I know you got a standing ovation, but beyond that, what struck you as a surprise?
One woman came up to me, and she was very nice and sincere, and she spoke with me about how just like you can look at this hatred from two different perspectives. And she told me about how she married a German man and has a half German daughter, and they live near here, and she goes to a school that has a big Jewish population, and knowing that she's German, the Jewish students and others discriminate against her because they're like, Germans and Jews can't be friends. And so it was just interesting to hear that insight that like the hate goes both ways, and it's so deeply rooted and historical that like it just prevents little kids from being friends with one another.
So Hannah Levinstein, your school, and then we'll come back, Max, to the Thursday presentation. To what degree around you, and you have to pick that up in a way that you can use it. Let's see. Okay. So which high school do you go to, Hannah?
I go to Laguna Beach High School.
And so that's not far from Newport Harbor. To what degree and you're also a senior, both seniors, to what degree at Laguna Beach High School, used to have that MTV, there used to be an MTV
Yes.
reality show, Laguna Beach High School, the real OC, right? So to what degree is there a sense of hate speech at Laguna Beach High School?
I'd like to think that like Laguna is a pretty loving community. There are some times where there are comments that are made, or when my brother was like a sophomore, they put up like a Jew club, come to this room for a meeting, and someone drew a swastika. So that was probably like 4 years ago. And like I've had a few jokes thrown my way. But there isn't anything too bad. It's a pretty open, loving community that like I don't think anything has ever happened like this before, but also you never know.
And to what degree is there use of, if you will, put down language against blacks or against Hispanics? Is that part of or not at Laguna Beach High?
So it has been in the past. I think my sophomore year, so 2 years ago, there was a group of all white students who went to this African-American kid's house and threw watermelons at his house and yelled the N-word and stuff like that. They all got expelled, obviously. But since that, our school's been very, very careful, and like we have a no place for hate club and stuff like that. And there hasn't been many type of things. They're very aware of what could happen now.
So at Laguna Beach High School, there aren't swastikas around?
No.
No. Because one of the things that surprised me in the speech you gave on that Monday, and the follow-up is at Newport Harbor, it's not uncommon, you said, to see swastikas. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I grew up, I went to preschool at JCC, and from there, grades K through 7, I spent at CVT. So, like, my whole life was social and academic, was revolved around the Jewish community, and everyone I knew was Jewish. I had very few Gentile friends, and so we had always been made aware of the hatred that is out there for people like us, but we had never really experienced it because we were surrounded by like our own. And so when I went to Ensign Intermediate School, which is the middle school that filters into Newport Harbor, it was an interesting wake-up call for me. Somehow, it's not like I introduced myself, I'm like, hi, I'm Max, I'm Jewish, but somehow, like, Judaism, it's like, once everybody found out I was a Jew, it's like my name was no longer Max, my name was Jew Boy, and kids would trip me, and kids would often they loved this joke, they would throw change across the floor in a classroom and be like, hey, Jew Boy, go pick it up, and stuff like that. And there's swastikas in the bathrooms, there's swastikas etched on desks, there's swastikas in textbooks. Yeah, and so I was just like, whoa, like, it's real. Like, they weren't hyping it up for nothing at TBT. And
but you said, I think it was on the NPR interview, that what was different about this is that they had always been anonymously etched.
Yeah. And
this was more public.
Yes. So this incident, it's not like they made the swastika and then all got out of the frame and took it and posted it anonymously. They all stood around it with their recognizable faces, confidently smiling, confidently saluting, and also just think about the sheer time it takes to organize that many cups full of beer into a swastika. It's clearly pretty methodical, no matter how ignorant it is. They thought of it and they acted on it, and no one stopped them. Well, we don't know if people tried, but we know that no one did stop them. And so it's concerning. It really is. It's concerning to think that those kids felt comfortable around that symbol in that picture and doing that salute, and then let alone posting it for the local public to see. So that it's like indicative that they think it's normal and view it as a joke that should be taken lightly by everyone when it's clearly not. And so that's why I think, rather than out of malice, these kids just acted out of ignorance. And when I talked to some of those kids, their one excuse was, I wasn't thinking. So when you're not thinking, the place your brain automatically goes to is hatred. And so that's like a clear indicator that there's something much bigger going on in our community and our nation as a whole.
What was the response to what was the Thursday presentation?
So from Monday through Wednesday, the Jewish students and I had been working closely with ASB.
How many Jewish students?
About 10 total, but me and Ben Kwong were like the main ambassadors pretty much. And Associated Student Body, they're the student government, and they organize assemblies and school events and stuff. And so they initially had a spirit rally on Thursday, and so they canceled that because of this event. And so in place of that rally, we organized kind of just like a response rally, a mandatory assembly for all 2,400 plus kids at the school. And our main focus was to get a Holocaust survivor in the room, and to have the Jewish students speak, and to have other minority representative students speak, to give their insight on the situation, and to just educate and inform the student populace about how stuff like this affects us.
So that Holocaust speaker was your grandma,
yeah.
Aggie Gurek. What was it like watching her for you in front of all your classmates?
It was so cool. And initially I was nervous. Okay, I was speaking myself, so I was nervous for that, but I was also nervous for my grandma, because I was like, these are 2,400 of some of the most merciless and rowdy and ruthless kids I've like ever seen, and my adorable, lovely, sweet grandma is going to go up to them in front of all of them and speak about one of the hardest things that's ever happened in history. So I was nervous for her, and I kept asking my mom, I was like, do you think grandma was nervous? And she was like, 100%, like, she is not nervous at all. And she said, this is not her first rodeo. And she proved that to me wholeheartedly, and she killed it so hard. It was amazing.
What did she say that touched the students?
She just personalized the issue, because this event, the Holocaust, 75 years ago, there's such a disconnect between that and the kids my age and kids younger than me growing up, and there's this common perception that the hatred that fueled the Holocaust doesn't exist in today's society, but that's just fully not true. And so she just gave some detailed recollections of her experiences, the people she's lost, the things she's seen, the things she's gone through, the little like occurrence, insignificant, minute details that ended up saving her life. And basically she was explaining to everyone that she's simply alive today because she's lucky. And so just for all those kids to put themselves in her shoes and to see this event from her perspective, I think it was very healthy. And people came up crying, and she had fan groups of kids coming up to her and talking to her, and it was amazing. And my main goal was not just punishment and condemnation of the acts, but education and love and unity to make sure that they don't occur again. And in the education aspect, grandmama really informed those kids. And yeah, because it's not like they have a grandma to tell them about that, and so I shared mine with them. And I'm very grateful for her. I really wouldn't. I don't know if I would be as protective of my own identity and as proud of it and as outspoken in defense of it if it weren't for her, because like she nearly died for our religion, so that can't go to waste and it can't be in vain.
Last, regarding Thursday's, keep going, but Thursday, what did you say that was different than Monday? What had you learned in those 3 days that you brought to your presentation?
So one thing we focused on was that not to focus just on the 10 kids who were in the picture who were involved in its creation, but think about the 20 plus kids who were at that party who didn't say anything, or who didn't try to stop them, or who just felt comfortable being there and watching, because that's indicative that like we were reading in today's parsha about how you're complicit in the acts even if you don't cause them, but if you just don't oppose them, then it's almost as if you're committing it. And so that's just something that worries me, and I don't want to live in a community where where someone sees something like that happening and doesn't say anything about it. So it's worrying, but I think that this kind of action was necessary. Stuff like this is going to happen, like no matter what, but the way it happened allowed us to gain enough momentum to create a movement and establish precedents. And I think the change that will come out of this will far outweigh the initial hurt, and I honestly couldn't care less about the reputation of my school or the community. Everyone's angle, from my perspective, everyone was coming up to me talking about how our school is going to look so bad, like this is such bad PR for the city. And I'm just like, I could not care less about PR. I just want like people to love one another and respect each other's differences and to really learn so that something like this can never happen again. And I think from that, the public relations and reputation aspect will heal on its own.
Hannah, do you have a question about Newport Harbor in terms of it being different than your school or similar?
How has the vibe at Newport been for the past few weeks?
So the first 2 days, so the Monday and Tuesday after it occurred, I don't think any classes got any actual work done, because basically every single period was just an open forum discussion with the teacher and students.
I think it made national news.
Yeah, international even.
International news.
Israel and Russia.
But I saw it like on NBC Nightly News, right?
And CNN and stuff.
CNN. Yeah. So this was like for kids at the high school. I'm refreshing my recollection. All of a sudden the spotlight's on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could tell that like there was tension in the air, and it was very good though to see that people weren't just treating it as something like a taboo issue. People were openly talking about it and discussing it and expressing their opinions on it. And so it was also just good for me to hear other people's opinions about it, because it helps formulate my own and just understand the situation better. And also I just think that it would be wrong not to talk about it, because like discourse is what drives the whole movement.
So in the classrooms, teachers, in response to Hannah's question, were talking about this issue and using it as a teaching moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Monday, I was tired and hungry and stressed, and I was like being berated by different media outlets, and
berated?
Yeah.
In what way?
Like, I would get, I don't know how they get my number or my email. I don't know who's like giving them all this information, but I would get contacted a lot from just different news sources trying to, get a hot take on the story. And I mean, I appreciate the outlet, but I understand it's just their job and they want views. And so I was running around. I was meeting with the principal, like talking to some news sources, other Jewish students, and then I'm meeting with the principal, and I come back late to my film class, and he gives me a late slip, and so I go in, and I'm just like, I need a break from this. Like, my whole past 48 hours has been spent dealing with this. I'm exhausted, and like I'm sad, and I'm stressed, and so I was like, I just want to go to film class and watch a film and relax. So I go into film class, they're all discussing it, and I'm like, okay, that's to be expected. And she's like, Max, do you have anything to say? And I say, I just want to watch a movie. And she says, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. And I was like, why are you sorry? And she said, we're about to watch Schindler's List. And so I spent the next hour watching Schindler's List. And yeah. But I mean, I'm really glad. A lot of classes were watching Schindler's List, which I think is great because it's very powerful, and like my grandma's story, it just helps personalizing the issue, because that's part of the reason it is an issue. It's because there's such a detachment from the reality of it, and that's what allows it to become normal, to become a joke, like those kids were doing.
So Alex or Leslie, do either of you want to add anything about if you do, you have to come here because it's getting filmed, and so I'd want you to be seen. Okay. All right. You'll sit. Whoever's going to speak first and say something. Alex? All right. All right. Stand behind her. That way you're in the camera too. All right. Okay. So any reactions to Max and Hannah? Now, which high school do you go to?
I go to Tesoro.
So that's where exactly? South County?
Yeah, South.
Mission Viejo?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, around there.
So, Mission Viejo, tell us about this sorrow and how what Hannah, which is relatively benign, I'm going to use this only because I want to make sure it's recorded. So, where it's relatively benign in Laguna's and less so in Newport, how would you say the sorrow? This sorrow. Tis sorrow.
It's probably more benign, like she was saying, because there's not many Jewish students at my school. So like this was never talked about in any of my classes. Like I know maybe one other person posted the like screenshot of the picture, but that was as much as we got.
But I've understood now, to get parents upset and all of us upset, particularly in the South County, missionizing to Jewish students. I don't know if that's been your experience, where if you don't become Christian, you'll go to hell. Have you ever heard that? Has that ever been part of your experience?
Not that exactly, just more like jokes where people don't take it seriously, but never like that.
So what's an example of a joke?
They make a lot of like concentration camp jokes, and like you said, like
give us an example of a concentration camp joke.
More like there's a candle, like, oh, don't get too close, you'll burn, or like just like stuff like that. And ashes, they like making ashes, or like homecoming. One time I was like, can I ask you a question? Would you like to go to homecoming with me? Like stuff like that.
As if that's clever.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your reaction when you saw that photo? Alex, what was your thought on it?
It was more just scary because like you always hear about things, but it's not you, and it's just getting closer and closer to us. And like I have a really close friend at TVT, and he was talking about how like they have to cancel games because people are like hailing at the games and posting pictures, and like he wasn't allowed to go to CIF because they didn't have enough games because they couldn't play a good amount.
All right, we'll give a moment. Thank you, Alex. For Leslie. So tell everybody where you go to high school.
I go to Sage Hill.
Okay. At Sage Hill, how many students in a class?
Like in the classroom.
Like you're a senior also, or a junior?
I'm a junior.
How many kids in the junior class?
Like 120, I think.
120. And Alex, what year are you in? A junior. You're also a junior. So 120. Of those, what percentage are Jewish?
There's like a decent amount of Jews. I think like probably I'd say like in the whole school maybe like 15%, maybe even
15%.
Like I'm not really exactly sure, but there's like definitely a decent amount.
And this topic, in what ways does it resonate or not resonate for you?
I think it's like really like, I guess you could say like hit close to home because my grandparents, 2 of them were Holocaust survivors. So it's just like every time like I don't know, I think at Sage it's like it's supposed to be the most like diverse community and like everyone's really accepting, which is true. I feel really like accepted there. But I think I also still have seen a lot of like anti-Semitism and just like hate there too, whether it be like small or not. So like I've heard like definitely like jokes. Like one time I was on the bus because I was managing the basketball team, and I was coming home from the game on the bus, and I was like sitting in the front, but I could hear the boys talking in the back, and like a student photographer who was taking pictures of the game was like, "Oh my gosh, oh, like, haven't you heard of the JCC, the Jewish Community Center?" It's like, it probably stands for Jewish Concentration Camp. And like, there's like dividers for like tests so that people don't copy off each other. And there's like been an incident where there was a swastika, like when you close the divider, just things like that. Like, it's like even though if you think that like everyone's really accepting, like I feel like there's still always some type of hate, and I just don't understand it.
And to what degree is it true, leaving Jewish students aside, true for other minorities, Black students, Hispanic students, in terms of how they're treated?
I don't know. I think like at Sage there's this thing called SAME, which is Sage Advocates of Multicultural Education. So like I think at my school specifically, there's a lot of like ways where we try to like make it very multicultural. Like today there's a multicultural fair. So I think there's not really much like prejudice against them, but I feel like I would notice it more if I were Black or if I were Hispanic.
Yeah. Do you want to add something in that regard?
One of the first things I noticed switching from TVT, which is like demographically very homogenous, and when going to Ensign and Newport Harbor, the amount of like de facto segregation between the Hispanics and the white kids is instantly like physically recognizable, and like you can feel it. Like there are areas of the school almost designated for different racial groups, and the Latinos feel weird walking through crowds of white kids. The white kids feel weird walking through crowds of Latinos. And there is such like a stark divide between them, and it's gotten worse since the 2016 election. We've had a lot of fiascos revolving like build the wall and like make the Mexicans leave paint, and kids wearing like MAGA hats and stuff. And it's not just Jews, and when it is Jews, it's much more subtle because we don't really have physical characteristics that separate us. But when it is with a demographic that does have physical characteristics, it's a much more like physical divide between the two. And it's sad to see at Harbor, and I think a lot of the Hispanics kids, they kind of they kind of submit to their oppression, and
in what way?
In the way that they don't seek the opportunities that they understand that, oh, like Mexican kids get in more trouble for the same offenses as white kids, or AP teachers won't sign off on Mexican kids' sheets to allow them to the class. Like they're doubted, their capabilities are doubted, and I think that makes them doubt their own capabilities, and they just kind of settle for that. And
on Thursday, you said you had minority students speaking also.
Yeah.
Did any of the minority students I'm sure they all had things to say, but something that sticks out for you that grabbed you?
And also, I mean, the LGBT plus students spoke, a Muslim student spoke, and it was all kind of like a shared speech. They all took turns saying different lines, and they were just taking stands against hatred, and they were standing with us, and we were just kind of like establishing like a defense against hatred. And it really united not just the Jews, but all minority groups at the school are like working together now, which is really nice to see.
So we have just a few minutes. Questions from people here and for our high school students. Devora? I don't know if how far this reaches. I'll repeat the question.
Okay. I'm curious. How many Jewish students do you think go to Newport Harbor? Because you mentioned you had a group of 10 Jewish students that, organized and spoke out.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of how many Jewish students are at that school?
I don't.
Not?
So the question is, do you have a sense at Newport Harbor, Max, how many Jewish students there are?
I don't have an exact number, but I would guess around like 20 to 30. Definitely less than, probably around 20 to 30. Yeah, very small percentage.
How many students are in the high school?
About over 2,400.
So of 2,400, only 20 or 30 are identifiably Jewish. Students, right?
Yeah.
Not percentage, but students. Yeah. Marvin and then Pat.
Two quick things. Number one, I'm overwhelmed by your presentation, your vocabulary, and maturity.
Thank you.
So my kudos to you. Number two, 4 of my sons graduated Newport High School, none of which did I get any feedback. My question for all of you is, what of your future? You're going on to college. Where and how are you going to handle this incident?
So I'm going to have Hannah answer first. When you go to, you're a senior, that's right, you get to go first. You go into college. You've been fortunate to go to a fairly liberal community. Laguna Beach, I love Laguna Beach, is not typical of Orange County. Or of any one place. How do you think you're going to handle college in light of hate speech?
I mean, I'm definitely going to join Jewish community groups like Hillel or whatever they have at the school, and make sure to stand up. And if I see people talking and saying anti-Semitic remarks instead of just yelling hate back to them, I'd like to have a conversation with them and learn what they think and tell them what I think, and maybe we can like change their minds passively, but I'm definitely going to not take the harsh approach in college, but I definitely want to continue to stay active in this cause.
So for this one, I'm just going to stay with the two seniors. Juniors, if you have other questions. So Max, from this experience, which is again all of a surprise of you stepping forward as a community educator, what do you think, and how does this prepare you for college?
Yeah, so I mean, I wasn't like anticipating this kind of thing. It's all just happened really fast, but it's changed my life and my perception of how I should be as a person for the better. And I think that this incident will blow over in the media, and it will blow over in a lot of people's minds, but it won't in my mind and in all of yours. And it's not like a 1 month process in response to this. Like, this will have consequences that I want my kids, if they go to Harbor, to experience. Like, my little cousin Lily is most likely gonna end up at Newport Harbor, and so that was one of my big motivations. I just want to make it a better place for her. And so in college, it would just be wrong of me if I only limited myself to speaking out against stuff like this in high school. And I also think it's pretty almost hypocritical to only speak out against offenses against Jewish people, because I think as any oppressed group with any other oppressed group has to stick together, and we all share like the same beliefs of inequality and stuff. So not just for the Jewish community, but for whoever needs it, I will definitely speak out for, and I want to be active socially and politically for the rest of my life, and I think this is a great start. So
Thank you. Pat? Then we'll come forward. Go ahead, Pat.
I certainly concur with what Marvin said, that your vocabulary and your presentation is very confident, very appealing, and you're touching hearts and souls.
thank you.
And I'm curious about what you feel is your next step now, because you're obviously going down in a new direction. Your life is taking another path. What's next step?
Repeat. So going forward, focused on Max, what do you see as your next step growing this quality of influence in education?
So the work doesn't stop here. I'm speaking at an event at TVT on Monday, and we're creating a club, a Blaze It Forward club at our school to kind of organize all the minority student groups and the Jewish students as well, and to raise money and awareness for good causes. And in terms of long-term plans, even before this, I planned to major in history and political science, and this hasn't changed that, and if anything, it has just enhanced it. And the direction I was heading towards was being a lawyer. And so, I mean, I obviously like to articulate arguments and speak my mind, and so that seems like a good profession for that. And yeah, I've yet to hear back from 11 colleges, so you don't have to ask me where I'm going yet.
Carl?
Was there anything resolved between the Jewish bully? How was it resolved, and how was it resolved?
Okay, so he's asking if there was any resolution with the other Jewish kid who threatened me in response to
Or the kids that were part of that Saturday night event.
So after the Thursday assembly in which my grandmother spoke, my mother, my grandmother, and my aunt and I, we were all directed into the theater, and in the theater, it was a big circle of chairs, and so in this caucus was the director of the ADL, Peter Levy, Rabbi Mintz of Chabad, school administrators, Jewish student representatives, other minority student representatives, and leading it was Anne Frank's stepsister, Eva Schloss. And so we walked in as Eva was, she was telling her story and her personal history, and then she gave her insight on like this incident, and then she just started asking the kids, almost grilling them, like without mercy or hesitation. She said to one kid, "You look guilty, son. What's on your mind?" and like she was awesome. She was really awesome, very straightforward and articulate, and I could see the amount of shame and remorse in these kids' eyes. A lot of them were crying, and one of them, as like he was like struggling to speak, he said he felt so ashamed of himself that like it's hard to be in his own skin. And like I know it's hard because these kids did such a bad thing, but I really did sympathize with them, and they are just kids and they made a stupid mistake, and I think they have at that point already they had learned so much from it, and they're doing a lot of Holocaust education. They're meeting with Holocaust survivors, they're going to the Holocaust Museum, they met at TVT, some of them are going to speak on Monday at TVT. And so basically at the end with them, we came to an agreement that, so the students just talked to the students involved. And so we said that in exchange for us making our community in Harbor a more welcoming and forgiving and safe environment for them to return to, because they were getting death threats, and obviously no one can really look at them the same after this. So we told them that we'd make it safer and more forgiving for them to return and redeem themselves into, in exchange for them helping us with the movement and righting their wrongs and stuff. So I think it was very progressive, and we hugged with them, and they cried and thanked us, and it was really cool.
So I see 3 hands. This will be the last 3 questions. We're going to ask the 3 questions, Dan, Stan, and Linda, and then we'll hear closing remarks, including a response to the 3 last questions. Dan?
How did the environment at the school change from that Saturday until, let's say, today? How did the principal and the rest of the administrator handle it? Number 2, did they remove all the swastikas and all the other graffiti that wasn't in school?
So Dan asks about how in the last 2 weeks that school has changed and the role of the principal in affecting that change, including removing of swastikas. Dan, Stan? Dan and Stan?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate you. I think that for speaking out, not only for the Jewish community, but as a Temple Sharonite, we take a personal interest in you and your family. I think there's a real teaching moment here, which was touched on, but wasn't emphasized. Here you are, you spoke up against what happened. There was another Jewish boy that tried to defend it. The question in my mind is, what made the difference? I think in that is a pathway to trying to correct the situation. Because look at the contrast. And Jews throughout history have not spoken out and gotten in trouble. You spoke out, he didn't. Why the difference?
So we'll come back, and Max, you'll touch on why you think it is that some Jews stood up, the 10, for instance, and others not only acquiesced but tried to justify it and even threatened violence. Last question, Linda.
High school teachers point out that there isn't much time in the year to teach everything they would want to teach. And I'm curious, and most high school teachers aren't Jewish, if you could change the curriculum in, say, one of your classes to 2 lectures taught by someone who wasn't Jewish, what do you think what would be most impactful on other high school students to learn about Jews and or about the Holocaust? How would you change the history curriculum?
So I'm going to start with the last question for Alex and Leslie. Any thoughts in terms of the curriculum and how you'd want to see in your high school curriculum more focused on sensitivity to hate? Alex?
I think probably just making kids, making kids emphasize, because if they read something in a textbook, they don't really think about it. They need to see it and understand it, because they don't realize that this still happens. They think it's something that happened 80 years ago and it's done.
Leslie, you want to add?
I completely agree with Alex. Like, I didn't even realize that like stuff like this still happens until it's become more like prevalent in our community. Like starting with like Blaze and like some like the graffiti on that one temple, and it just like keeps building up. And I think it's really opened my eyes to it. So I really agree. Like reading from a textbook, you don't really realize. But like for example, different topic, but we were watching like a documentary on like Hiroshima and things like that. I didn't know much about it, but seeing like the documentary about it and like just like envisioning it made me really realize the effects. So I think really not just textbooks, but like bringing in a survivor or like watching more videos about it, I think that would be a lot more helpful.
So what I gained from the two of you.
Oh, true. So in February, we had a play at Sage called Fear and Misery in the Third Reich, which I think did open people's eyes up a lot about the Holocaust, because it was about like the events leading up to the Holocaust. And I think it really had an emotional effect on a lot of the students and families at Sage. So I think that's like also one way that could happen. And I'm one of the co-founders of the Jewish Student Union. or Jewish Student Connection Club at our school, and we had an open discussion. We brought Jack Pariser, a Holocaust survivor, and someone from the ADL to speak. So I think things like that really help.
So what I gained from Alex and Leslie is that reading doesn't always personalize, and it's by having it as an immediate story that you think that needs to be done more in your schools. Hannah and then Max will have things that relate more specifically to your experience. So your thoughts on curriculum and educating against hate?
Yeah, so I think this is like the biggest thing that we should gain from what has happened is that we need to educate. And I was actually, my government teacher he's not Jewish, but he was actually like crying in class talking to us about this. And he brought up a great point. Our freshman year, at least at my school, we have like half a year of health, because that's like required. And the other half, we have this weird class called Global Studies where you don't really learn anything and it's very weird. And they used to have geography and they changed it to this, and I agree with him. He thinks we should change it to a tolerance class, where your first semester of high school, you're learning to be tolerant not just of Jews, but of all different people. And I think that's like the smartest thing, because at my school, like we barely even touched on the Holocaust. Like sophomore year, we went into detail about every single battle of World War II, but I think we went into like 2-minute detail about the Holocaust, and that really like made me question things. So to have like an entire semester where we talk about the Holocaust and about different like big things that have happened in our like community and in the world would be very beneficial.
So, Max, you had the first word and the last word, though I'll have a closing thank you. Dan asked about how the school has changed and the role of the principal, the graffiti that you described. Stan asked about what you think is different in terms of why you stood up and other students did. Address those two questions.
So, I've been really, I think I can... Hello? Testing.
You're good.
Yeah, so I think I've been really happy to see how proactive the administration at our school has been in regards to the incident. They've been very cooperative and helpful in organizing assemblies and creating a club even when the club creation deadline is passed, and about organizing other school events. And I get called into the principal's office to have like a personal conversation with him like almost every day now. And I mean, it's weird, but it's cool. And yeah, and so they really want to take it by the horns and like do whatever is necessary to help us in this movement and to like set a precedent at Harbor. And like they were talking about us commissioning art students to make like a tolerance mural and stuff, and so a lot is actually being done, and it's very good to see.
And in terms of Jewish students who stand up versus Jewish students who didn't, what would be your thoughts in talking to other Jewish students about that?
Yeah, so I think the hatred that there is for the Jewish people, people absorb that hatred through jokes, through propaganda, through little comments here and there, from stereotypes, from pop culture, from their parents, how they were raised. And I think a lot of it comes from your peers. And I think that this kid absorbed some of that hate as a Jew and harbored that hatred for himself. And I think, like, because my grandma was a Holocaust survivor and because my family is so traditionally Jewish and we're so proud of it and it's such a big part of our lives that I brush the hate off, and like it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't make me ashamed when people say stuff about Jewish people. I mean, it hurts me, but it doesn't make me feel less of myself. And so I think that this kid, unlike me, absorbed a lot of that hatred and did feel some sort of a shame for his own identity. And it's sad that that kind of hatred is so like ingrained in our culture that even like the targeted demographics can like hate themselves. It's really mind-boggling to think about, but that just shows you how powerful the hate is, that someone can even like defend something like that.
So I want to thank Hannah and Leslie and Alex and Max. Each of you makes us feel blessed by being Jewish, and by each of you. And we started with you, Max, as the centerpiece because you've been challenged these last 2 weeks to stand up among your peers as a Jewish educator. And you have educated your peers, and you've educated us. So to all of you, thank you.
Thank you.